I'm Andrew, the founder of MicroAcquire, and I will be here to support Paul. Paul is he's going to introduce himself, so I'll save him for that. But he's the subject matter expert here, so really excited to kick this off and just really excited to help all of you get acquired. So thank you for joining, especially for everybody in different time zones, people in Australia enjoying summer. It's just really inspiring to see just so many entrepreneurs looking to sell their business or grow their business from all across the world. So thanks for joining. Long-winded answer, but yeah, I'm Andrew. I founded MicroAcquire and super excited for this webinar.
Yeah, great to have all of you here. I think I've been emailing with a few of you over the last week or so. So thanks for joining. I'm James Graves. I'm the general counsel here. I'll be chiming in here and there, supporting Paul, and yeah, just really excited to get all your questions answered and hopefully get you guys some exits soon.
So I'm Paul Kelley. I'm VP of the M&A marketplace. Super happy to be part of this team. What an awesome team I got to join here. You know, at the beginning of, I guess it was the end of November, we started doing some outreach to founders to find out really what pain points they were experiencing, how we can help them along. You know, our goal is, you know, to help founders get acquired. So how can we best serve the community? And what we've learned through that endeavor, through a ton of outreach, is that there's a lot of need for some just basic education. So our goal today is not to tell, you know, Ali in Los Angeles how to sell your business specifically, however, but to give you an overall kind of understanding of the process, what to expect, and how best to prepare yourselves. Also knowing that we're here, if you have any questions, you guys all have our emails. We'll either do our best to facilitate some answers for you or to direct you to someone that can help. So also just as far as the entire presentation, you know, we're giving our opinion as far as what structure and process should look like, but as in anything with your business, if you know, you should always seek out professional guidance and you know, legal advice should you get into a transaction. So with that, I'm going to do my best to stay on schedule here. As Roger said on the opening, we're going to break this into we're going to have a couple breaks during the, not breaks where go have lunch, but breaks to ask questions. So it'll be pertinent to that section. We will be recording, as you guys know. We'll send it out to everyone. And the questions that we don't get to, we'll be logging and we'll be getting back to you after the webinar. So we will answer all of your questions. And with that, let's go into the agenda. You know, what we're going to try to cover here is how to prepare for a sale, determining the value of your business. That's critical. How to prepare your present. You know, how you're going to present your business. We'll break, then we'll go into the next section, which will be how to fill the buyer inquiries, how to, you know, vet the buyers, how to, you know, qualify them. There's some tricks of the trade there that I'll share with you. When to share your company information, you know, fielding LOIs, reviewing LOIs, what to look for. We'll break again there. That last section will be due diligence, and what financing, escrow, and funding process looks like. Allocation of purchase price. A lot of people don't even know what that is, so we'll touch on that. Every transaction will have one if you're going through an escrow process. Buyer and seller disclosures and the importance of those. And closing escrow, training. You know, if there's an organization with you know, staff, and there's going to be a transition period in training, and we'll want to talk about that as well. So with that, let's get into it. Track of time here. Okay, so really the first thing when you're thinking about selling the business is really a needs assessment. And when I say that, it's what are you as a founder, as a seller of your business, what are you trying to achieve? Are you retiring? Are you just sick of your partner and you need to pull the ripcord and get out? Are you parlaying this into the next endeavor that you're probably already working on and you're going to utilize that capital? Those are all important factors because they they change your strategy moving into a marketing strategy. It changes your strategy as far as how you're going to price the business. If you're wanting to have something move quicker, obviously a more attractive price will help that process along. When you are determining value, as you guys probably have seen, there's valuations all over the place. It's a scattershot. We have developed some tools here that can help you with that. We have a micro MRR tool. It's a valuation tool to give you a range, at least hopefully bracketing what your expectations are. Clearly, if you want to get a really precise valuation, we have a directory of professionals that you can go and access, valuation experts to hire and get a proper valuation done there as well. And again, keep in mind that it all trickles back to what are you after here? If you're really trying to get this moving quickly, then think about how you're gonna price it. Determining value is again, it's all over the place. So there's, at the end of the day, it's going to go off of your financial metrics and some multiple of that. Unless it's really a true startup that's we're seeing a ton of these things transact, where it is a buy versus build strategy for the acquirer. So instead of them going out and developing and building out this platform, they could just come to MicroAcquire and pick it up by the API and drop it on top of their stack, and they're moving. More traditional ways of valuing are just multiples of SDE or net profit or EBITDA. SDE is a seller's discretionary earnings. So that is basically taking your financial report, your profit and loss statement, and adjusting out any owner benefit, meaning anything you pay yourself. If you put your health insurance and your families through the business, you're going to adjust that. The trip to Hawaii once a year, what have you. You're going to push that back to conclude an SDE. And then net profit and then EBITDA are also other metrics. And what we're also seeing a lot is multiples of gross sales, typically in these technology companies. So with that, again, it's complicated. There's various rules of thumb. We're happy to help you try to get there. It's not an exact science. And what I didn't do when I opened up and introduced myself is qualify myself. My background before joining MicroAcquire over the past, a little over 20 years was in Main Street brokerage and lower middle market M&A. I managed an office here in San Francisco for a little over a decade. I had about 25 agents working with me. So saw a lot of transaction, a lot of deal flow. And then I left and started my own firm with a partner focusing on the lower middle market, true lower middle market, 5 to $25 million type transactions. With all of that experience, I can tell you there's no exact science. At the end of the day, businesses will sell what somebody is willing to pay for that business at that moment in time. So keep that in mind. Don't get frustrated. It's a process, and stick to the process. You'll do fine. Also, there's a lot of other factors that go into valuing a company or determining a market price. So, we've heard a lot about, a similar business like mine sold for, 10x or 15x. But what you're not seeing when you're reading about that is all of the other intricacies of that businesses, the nuances that add value. And that's just the realities of the market. Good housekeeping is critical. I've always been a big proponent of getting your house in order before going to market. Buyers intrinsically want to find a way to devalue the opportunity that they're looking at. Don't give them the opportunity to do that. You want to have a proper package put together. You want to present yourself as organized. And that's everything from how you're responding to inquiries, to how you're presenting your business, to how you can speak about your financials. It's really about, what is the old adage about first impressions? It's critical here. And again, don't give buyers the opportunity to devalue your business. Get your house in order when you're going to market. All right, okay. When you are preparing your business, you're going to want to present it in detail. And what we like to see, particularly on the larger businesses, is a memorandum put together that really details the operation. And you can see here that it is very detailed. It's everything from the overview, the growth opportunities, the highlights, investment highlights, what the competition is out there, who owns the business, what operating characteristics, what products and services you offer, and the various slew of other things there. So it's really explaining the nuts and bolts of the operation and getting somebody a well-rounded understanding. What I always like to say is you want to answer the question before it's asked. Again, going back to presentation and how you're perceived from the buyer. And I always suggest as well, when preparing the memorandum, to do diligence on yourself. Create a data room, do diligence on yourself, and go through it. We have a pretty good idea, and I could share with you kind of a standardized diligence list that most people were going to ask for the same generic set of things. There'll be nuanced things that some people ask for, but we know the recurring things that they're going to be asking for. So do diligence on yourself, prepare all that, put it in a room, and then again, when you do get to that stage, you're going to look uber organized and don't give anybody an opportunity to devalue. So I've done well with the first section. Roger, if you want to open it up, or James or Andrew, if you have any comments on that first section, please chime in. Otherwise, we could answer some questions.
And I would just say that your point on doing DD on yourself is huge. They're going to come in and tear your data room to shreds, and if there's any sort of outstanding liability or any sort of thread that hasn't been tied up, they're going to use that opportunity to either delay the deal or, like Paul said, devalue you. So if you get ahead of that as quickly as possible, it really closes the door to any sort of devaluation or delay in your deal, which, I mean, obviously it can kill at the very end, which is the last thing you want. So
the adage of the saying in the business is time kills deals. So, any delay, oh gosh, I don't know where that license is, or the stock certificates, or, if you have to go scramble and find something and you're waiting a week or two, I've seen deals fall apart because of that, because that buyer is looking for something else and they move on. So don't give them the opportunity.
Okay, so we have actually one question from David. So how do I overcome people who ghost after introductions? It seems like 90% don't reply after getting access. Is our deck really that terrible?
No, don't take offense. Keep in mind that MicroAcquire is a behemoth. It's there's we've got over 100,000 registered buyers, over 3,500 premium buyers. So a lot of the buyers, and I'm going to touch on this later, but a lot of the buyers are window shopping. Some of them are just really looking for something, and they're just hitting a lot of businesses. Treat every one of those like that's the buyer until they're not. So I wouldn't get too concerned about ghosting the buyers, but I'm going to talk about how to handle buyer inquiries a little bit later in the presentation.
Awesome.
Is there a particular, did you want to ask Michael Bush? I can answer that one.
Yeah, so Michael asked, is there a particular size of business where you'd expect to see a CIM?
Really it's about, I would think that anything over $500,000, frankly, I think every business should have one. You should at least have a executive summary, which is the light version of a SIM. But again, even if it's a $50,000 transaction, do you want to get the most you can for your business? And if you're going to put in the work and present yourself as a very serious operator, it's going to show the value of the business by the way you're presenting it, if that makes sense. So when I had the brokerage and I was managing folks, I would say anything over $500,000 had to have a memorandum put together.
And one thing I'll add to that too is we're happy to create a light sim for you. And for those of you that aren't familiar with a sim, it's basically a pitch deck in reverse. Instead of pitching for investors, you're giving information to buyers to make a decision on acquiring your business. So when you list on MicroAcquire, we'll send you a type form, and we're happy to create a pretty detailed sim for you, completely free. So if you list on MicroAcquire and you see that type form, definitely fill it out, and we'll add that to your listing completely free.
Awesome. We have a few other questions here. How do you factor in size of the market into valuation from Keeble? I'm not sure if this is something that we could take on right now, but Paul?
I don't know if I exactly understand the question. I'm not seeing it either.
I think, do you care if I get this one,
Oh,
Paul?
please.
So size of the market. Yeah, so I see this kind of a lot, like, hey, I have a email building tool and my competitor sold for $10 billion. So I'm pricing it on their multiple. That's not a correct way to value your startup. That's not very defensible. But what I would do in terms of, if you're in a big market, point out the opportunities. Like maybe there's things that, you do better than your competitors. You really want to highlight, the good parts of your business, but then also like the things that maybe you're not doing well that are growth opportunities. I know this sounds counterintuitive, and Paul, maybe you have different feedback on this, but from my experience, when I see a listing come in and it's doing really great financially, there's a lot of happy customers, but maybe the website looks like terrible and it's in a great market, that's an opportunity for a buyer. So a buyer is going to look at that and say, hey, if I can improve, conversion rate optimization, or, when leads come in, I can convert them at a higher rate to paying customers, this business is going to potentially take off. And there's a number of different ways to, grow a business. But in terms of market, being in a good market does help, but I wouldn't anchor your valuation or your positioning too much towards like, hey, MailChimp sold for 100 times revenue. We're in the same market, so we should be valued too. That's just not how it works. And then also in terms of just, really how I think about valuations is, buyers are valuing your current traction and not your potential traction and execution. So there's a big difference there. So that's where you see, the huge valuations from investors, because they're valuing essentially the next 3 years potential revenue, but buyers are valuing the execution and revenue that you've already accomplished today. So being in a big market is great and to your advantage, but I wouldn't anchor on it too much and compare yourselves to, some of the leaders in the market to arrive at your valuation.
And just to close on that topic, thanks, Andrew. The market that you're in, that's great. That's a value add, but that's going to not add a point to the multiple or 5 points. That's going to help you reach the maximum of your present value. So there's always going to be a range, right? There's going to be a low range and a high range. That market and the appeal and the market size, that's just going to help you reach the max of the multiple that's going to be applied to your financial metrics. Of course, again, nuances to the business. If there's some proprietary tech, IP, what have you, that's different, and that's a different way to value it. But if you're just going off of sheer financial metrics, the market size will add value to help you achieve the max value multiple for which your business's performance.
All right, guys. We have a few more questions, but we got to move on.
Again, everyone, we see all the questions. We're going to respond to them all best we can after the webinar concludes. So let's move on to the next section. So pertinent, because we were just talking about it. So fielding inquiries. Yes, you will get a lot of inquiries. I think Andrew, you said that there was over 30 unique buyer interest for every single listing that we have. So it's phenomenal in that regard. I've seen that initial message that says, and I'm sure that you guys have if you're on platform, interested, or send me more information. And, you know, in my world, previous MicroAcquire, I would have just said, keep it moving, guys. I wouldn't even respond. Not the move here. The move here is to respond to every single one, to treat every single one of those inquiries as if that is the buyer until they disqualify themselves as such. And so the way that I've been helping founders kind of feel that, and often it's a lot of traction, so it takes some time. Create yourself a cheat sheet of responses, cut and paste them into the chat, right? So if you're an e-commerce business, oh, thanks, Andrew, for your interest. Do you have experience in e-commerce? Wait till they respond. That's the first, you're gonna have them jump through these subconscious hoops to basically qualify themselves. They're gonna perform for you. So if they respond to that one, yes, I've experienced in e-commerce, great. I have a deal book I'm happy to share with you, but you know, if we do get to the finish line, how would you plan on funding this? Get them to answer that question. You're not asking for their bank account right now. How are you going to fund it? Once they answer that, fantastic. I've attached here a confidentiality agreement. If you do care about confidentiality, you know, I would say before sharing your SIM or deal book, have them execute one. And that would be the third kind of hoop that I would have them jump through. And that is a way of quickly qualifying buyers. And if they ghost you, don't be sad about it. Just know it's you're gonna probably have 8 ghosts to get to one buyer, and just count them off. You just tick them off and say, "Oh, awesome, another ghost. I'm getting closer to a sale." So
yeah, and one comment I'll add there too is, you know, just like in sales, you know, every no gets you closer to a yes. And most people, instead of just telling you they're not interested, if they don't respond back, just assume they're not interested and move on. Again, just like in sales, if it's interesting, but people would rather receive 10 emails from you than just say, "Hey, I'm not interested." So, so if you feel ghosted, that's really a way of just saying, "I'm not interested," and they just weren't, you know, polite enough to just say no, which is something that, you know, we want to address. But again, like Paul said, treat every lead that comes to you as, you know, the potential buyer, and then also do due diligence on the buyer too. Check out their LinkedIn profile. Is like, you can probably get a good feel of if they can transact acquisition just based on, you know, their LinkedIn profile. Have they had a previous exit? Are they the CEO of a company? Are they, you know, a corp dev team, which is corporate development is the title of a person inside of a company that acquires companies. So you can do a lot of due diligence on the person just ahead of time to really get a feel. If you're selling a business for $1 million and it's, you know, a college student, they're probably not going to be able to transact. So just simple questions like that, like Paul said, where, you know, you're just asking, how would you fund this, can really go a long ways in terms of screening buyers. It looks like Paul's going to tackle all this.
Well, you've done most of it for me. So yes,
sorry to get ahead of you.
As Andrew said, you know, the buyer inquiries will come with, you know, you can check out their LinkedIn profile. They have to have a LinkedIn to participate on the platform. So that's a big indicator right there. And again, just having them jump through those subconscious hoops is I found anyway a very good way to qualify them, and it's judging their performance. You know, if they're not responding and they get back to you in a week, or if they don't want to sign a non-disclosure agreement, why? You know, on the flip side of that is, you know, the question I've heard a million times is, if the business is so great, why are you selling it? Be prepared to answer that question. That's a valid question. Why are you selling it? Because if you don't answer that and it's not a satisfactory answer to the buyer, then they're going to think that you're hiding something. And even if you do get to diligence, the diligence is just going to be a more painful process where they're going to really dig and try to find something. So again, it goes back to presentation, be prepared, answer the question, and you know, you'll be fine.
Could I add one small piece
Sure.
to that too? There's a question from Matei in terms of hopping on a call with buyers. when you sell your business, you want to get to know the buyer. Like, it's not a transaction where you're just buying something off eBay and you hand over and it's it. There's going to be a transition period. There's potentially going to be terms in the acquisition for you to be available for consultation with questions. So it's also really important to, have a good relationship with the buyer, because if you have a bad relationship with the buyer right off the bat, that's probably a big indication that this is going to be a headache acquisition. And I suggest that to buyers all the time too. Is like, your reputation is important. And if you're, rude to sellers, like, no one's going to want to work with you. So, this is a two-way street where, you both need to get on the same page. And sometimes, you know, selling to a buyer that just makes it really easy, really understands your business, is super excited about it, you get along great, there's a good plan. And that's all achieved by just getting on the phone and chatting with them. I always say, a 5-minute phone call is the same as sending 500 emails.
So to Andrew's point, as far as that process, when you're qualifying the buyer, we talked about that. Say they performed, you've sent them the deck. When sending it, pre-schedule a follow-up. So, they're going to get the deck or the SIM. They're going to clearly have questions about that. Those questions will then be your agenda for that call. So set up a Zoom call, a Google Meet, what have you. I'd suggest doing it with a video situation like this. If it wasn't for these crazy times, I would want to get in a room with somebody. I would always say that, when I was pre-MicroAcquire, I would always want to get the parties in front of each other right away. It doesn't need to be a love fest, but there needs to be a fair amount of goodwill and common goal, because, deals are complicated and you want to at least have a decent working relationship to get through it. So, they've reviewed it, you set up a call. The agenda for that call is whatever questions they have, barring deep dive diligence questions, that's safe for diligence. But during that call, you get to know them a bit. They'll get to know you. They'll ask the questions. And frankly, at that point, sans maybe one more call, I would say that they have what they need to either move forward with an offer or to pass on the opportunity. And don't get discouraged if they pass. It's okay. You're going to learn from it. You're going to tighten up your deck. Maybe they asked a question that you didn't include and you'll add it. So just take it as a learning exercise on this journey. When you do get an offer, most of the offers you'll see here are going to be in the form of an LOI, which is a letter of intent. And the letter of intent is basically mapping out, outlining the consideration, the price, the structure of that price, and the timing of that price, the timing of the close, the diligence, everything, all the components of that offer. LOIs are not binding. And James, you might want to touch on the LOI piece. The only thing that is typically binding in an LOI is a no shop or exclusivity clause. And we see this often where you'll get these LOIs for a smaller size business and they have like 90-day, 120-day exclusivity period. That means that you can't market the business, you can't talk to any other buyers. And it's, for the smaller businesses, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. So I would try to tighten up that diligence, that no shop period, to make it, germane to your transaction. James, did you have anything to say about that piece?
Yeah. So like Paul said, there's typically only two pieces in the LOI itself that are binding. That's the no shop clause. And then if you enter an NDA that's contained within the LOI, that'll be binding as well. Most often that NDA will come maybe a couple weeks before the LOI, so it'll be in a separate document. But what I always say, especially from the seller perspective, is that an LOI is a negotiable instrument, and it should be heavily negotiated. A lot of people just get them in PDF form and roll over and accept the terms as is. And although most terms aren't binding, it's very psychologically valuable. And if you detract from the general outline of what's set forth in the LOI, the buyer will keep coming back to it and basically accusing of you or reneging on the terms that you initially agreed to. So, I mean, don't be afraid to negotiate it. Don't be afraid to involve an attorney as early as the initial NDA, so they're prepared to look at the LOI when it does come in.
Awesome, thank you. And Just NDA, just so you know, you'll hear NDA, you'll hear CA. It's confidentiality agreement or non-disclosure agreement. They're somewhat interchangeable with some nuances there, but it's basically saying, I'm going to share info. You can't tell anybody about it. And then as far as the, James touched on it, when you do receive that offer, that is the first step towards the negotiating dance. There's various components to a transaction or to an offer, the way it's structured, the cash component to it. If they're going to ask you to carry any paper seller note, it's where sometimes they'll ask if you would be willing to carry a percentage of the transaction, meaning that you would be paid back over time for that period. You're lending them money like a bank would. That's very common. Upfront cash. There's sometimes earnouts included. That example we heard about the market size and they want to get max value. Okay, well, we can work on that, but you have to share in the risk. And I'm speaking as if I were a buyer, and we would share in that risk, meaning I'll pay you over time as long as the business performs as you think it would. So, and then James, why don't you touch on those last 3 bullet points there too? Because those are in your arena.
Yeah, so you'll be talking about the reps and warranties.
Reps and warranties particularly, yeah.
Yeah, so you're going to have to, any buyer that's really worth its salt, it's going to require you to make substantial reps and warranties about the business. And this is really where the DD thing and what we mentioned earlier comes into play and why it's so important. They're going to want you to rep that all the shares are issued outright, you're caught up on your taxes, you own all your assets, your CapEx for the last year hasn't gone over a certain point. And they're going to want you to make pretty substantial representations about all the contracts you're involved with. So making sure those are all in order. If you have any issues in contracts, you're able to at least explain those away at the very least. And then in tandem with the reps and warranties, you're going to have to make a bunch of disclosures that are exceptions to the reps and warranties, right? So there's on a typical asset purchase agreement, there's the agreement, and then attached thereto is the disclosure schedules, which is usually a very, very extensive document that lists everything that you say in the reps that isn't quite correct. So again, attorney is really valuable at this stage. I'm obviously a little biased, but you need those are actionable representation and warranties. So if they turn to be false in the future, you open yourself up to liability. So be careful there. Don't just skim over those. And if necessary, and you think it's prudent, have an attorney help you out.
Thank you, James. So you've gotten there. You've accepted an LOI. You've reached terms, and then you begin the process of going through diligence and diligent. And this is also why it's important to do that upfront diligence. So you're prepared. Everything's already there. You're ready to rock and roll. So the buyer is going to want to see clearly. They're going to want to dig into your financials. They're going to want to make sure that there's no, that you paid the tax man, that you paid your tax obligations, and escrow will do a search on that to make sure that there are no outstanding liens or encumbrances to the business. So when somebody takes it over, they're not going to have something come up out of the woodwork. They'll want to look at who comprises your team, what kind of marketing you do, the market share. Are you, I sold years ago a very profitable multiple kids summer camp, and I was like, holy cow, this is a cash cow. This guy takes off 7 months a year. You go to Europe and he would do it all during the summertime. So there is some some seasonality definitely with that business. So does your business have that? And they'll dig into the churn, your customers. Is there any customer concentration issues? Meaning, do you have one contract with the city and county of San Francisco that's making up 90? Look at the agreement and the contract, and so again, do the diligence on yourself up front, and it will help this process a lot better. Again, how you present yourself and your business will get you through this easy as possible. So we have, did you guys have any comments on that, James or Andrew?
No, I just maybe some advice that I have is typical contracts that a buyer will sort of take issue with. A lot of those are open-ended contracts that you can't terminate like at will. So if you want to terminate it, you have to go into negotiations with the buyer, and sometimes they'll do your shakedown. Contracts where you owe out a bunch of money with no really determinable end in sight, that's also a big one. Contracts that are unassignable. So just general things to think about when you're entering agreements and partnerships with people. Take care not to enter into anything and sign any document just off the cuff, and make sure to at least take a quick look at it to make sure it's not going to be really onerous and be a huge red flag when due diligence comes along.
And that, that's also, again, harping on the pre-due diligence on yourself. Look at your contracts, not only the contracts with your customers, but the contracts you have with your vendors, with your employers, employees. You look at all of that, because they'll have terms in there as far as if you get acquired or if you sell your company or more than 50%, there's all kinds of stuff there. So you'll want to understand what that looks like. What's painful is if you get there and you get to the point where you're looking to assign contracts and there's a problem, and then all of the work that you just did for the last 30 days just falls on the ground. So uncover that yourself in advance, and you'll have a smoother transaction. So we're almost on point here, Roger. We have a few minutes for some questions about this section.
Yeah, so we have a question from Rachel. I think these questions might be a little bit all over the place, but Rachel says, if you know that a big customer is going to churn in 6 months, do you disclose it? If so, when? It doesn't show up anywhere in financials until 6 months from now.
So when you put together your, there's a buyer and seller, just like when you buy a house, there's a seller disclosure, and the buyer will also have a disclosure statement that's filled out. I would always have those in the memorandum. Again, no surprises. Time kills deals, and so does surprises. Surprises kill deals. So if you're aware of that, that is most definitely something that you're going to want to disclose. Any kind of market conditions that you're aware of, you will need to disclose. And subsequently, when I was working with clients, and I would take one on, and they would tell me something like that. Now I have an obligation and a fiduciary responsibility to disclose that as well. So you do want to disclose it. You want to be have full clarity and transparency. And what you don't want to have happen is have somebody buy the business, that customer go away, somebody finds out you knew about it, and that could be problematic. And you have James calling in.
Yeah, I don't do that type of law anymore, thankfully. But I was going to say that generally a standard indemnity provision in an M&A agreement is indemnity for a breach of any of the reps and warranties. So if a rep is breached, then you basically have to reimburse them for any damages they have as a result of that. So it's going to end up being really negative to you and disadvantageous to you if you do that. So like Paul said, just reiterate his point.
Roger, can you take one or two more?
Yeah, I have one from Ronnie Aroni. I listed my website on MicroAcquire to see if there's traction. It's not completely built. I have 0 MRR, 0 users, but I have more. I had more 10 listed buyers interested. Let's say if I want to sell it at that stage of development, how do I price it? This might be a little bit too deep, but let me know.
That is going back to the initial, buy versus build. So, and we see this, and Andrew, you could speak to this because you see it all the time. I mean, that type of a transaction, how to value it, that's the tricky part. But if you want to field that one, Andrew.
Yeah, so that one's kind of tricky. So you can have a situation where, I guess, let me start with this. So what you really want to be doing when you're selling a business that's, let's say pre-revenue, not a lot of traction, but it's a great product. You want to find a buyer that sees value in the product and the traction that you have accomplished. And then that negotiation is the value in terms of how you get there. For, if it's a business that sells to that specific customer and they see a clear way to grow that very quickly, they may be willing to pay an outrageous multiple. We see it all the time. And sometimes we even kind of raise our eyebrows, but it makes sense to the buyer because, it's a great return on investment. On the other hand, though, a it really depends on the quality of the product, but I would say, just being patient is also huge because, we have a lot of buyers, or excuse me, sellers that go on MicroAcquire and expect sort of like instant like LOI, but you really gotta, sell the business. So in this situation, you want to be pointing out like how this could fit perfectly inside of this other buyer's businesses or business and how they could potentially grow it. So the business better than anyone. So share what you've tried. Maybe you just developed it and you don't know how to market and that's not your thing and you've already moved on to something else. So just being transparent on why you're selling, how this could be a good fit. And then really from there, getting to evaluation is just figuring out what you and the buyer feel is a fair price for the asset. But there's so many variables in that, complexity of code, the list can kind of be endless. So I'll stop there. But I'll also note that we generally don't list a lot of pre-revenue startups anymore. That was a decision that we made. So my next piece of advice, if you're at pre-revenue and you're looking to sell your business, is to just get a handful of customers. That could take the interest of your business from like here to here, because a lot of buyers, what they're looking to acquire is product market fit. They're looking to acquire proven traction in the market to save themselves years of time from building a product, figuring out the messaging with customers. And if you can figure that out, you can take your valuation from here to up here and have a lot more interest from buyers. So that's what I would personally do. But if you do have a business on MicroAcquire with low revenue, low traction, you're looking for a buyer where it's going to be a great fit in their business. And it might take a while to find that buyer. Because again, you're selling, not a lot of product market fit. And that's really what a lot of the buyers on MicroAcquire are looking for.
And thanks, Andrew. And there's one question here that just we're over the time allotted, but I'm going to answer this quickly just because it's a good question. So Osman asked about M&A advisors are saying that they're only doing exclusive agreements to market your business, and that's standard. And your feeling is that working with only one M&A advisor seems risky. Well, keep in mind, particularly if that advisor, and yes, it is very common. It is common. But keep in mind, if that advisor is doing that on contingent basis, they have an interest in getting it done. And what they don't want to have happen is do a bunch of work on it and somebody else swoop it out. That said, it's up to you to check references and to make sure that is a qualified advisor, that they have experience in your space, that they have recent transaction, proof of recent transactions, that they're active, that they have their, licenses in place. And it's pretty easy to vet that out. Ask for references. But yes, that is a very standard thing. And the good advisors, they're going to become, by the time I would go to market with somebody's business and I built that memorandum, I'm an expert on your business. And so it's, it is a very common thing. So on to our last section. Transaction management. So you're in a deal. And I would, I was very surprised when I took over managing broker of that brokerage that I managed for 10 years, that there was no plan once somebody got into a transaction. The buyers and sellers, they've met a few times. There's all this goodwill going into it. They get into an agreement. It's all raw. And then they go into their separate corners. And the only time they talk to each other is either at the closing table or when there's a problem. And what you don't want to do is not speak to somebody for weeks and then only be talking to them when there's an issue that needs to be squashed. So to maintain that continuity of goodwill and transparency, I always said, make a plan. I created a transaction planner that you would once a week get together, go over what everyone's done that week, how we're doing. It keeps the goodwill going and helps going through that. But stick to whatever plan it is and stick to it. Escrow and closing documents, the allocation of purchase price, and the disclosures. So the allocation of purchase price is every deal has various components to that deal. So if it's a, let's say it's a $1 million transaction and it's a restaurant for just for the sake of this discussion. So they're paying on they're paying for goodwill. They're buying the inventory, the fixtures, all of the stuff that comes with the restaurant. Perhaps it's so popular that they patented like a name or copyrighted it. So there's all these different buckets where you would place that value. And if this gets somewhat complicated, there's different, for those different buckets, they're going to have different tax implications for both buyer and seller at the end of the year when it gets to your taxes. I've seen transactions, and I'm sure James can speak to it at a higher level with real M&A transactions, that the allocation of purchase price negotiation can be more complicated than the negotiation for the original purchase price, because there's different implications for both buyer and seller. James, did you want to touch on that at all?
I was just going to anecdotally talk about how a deal I was involved with last summer, before I was with MicroAcquire, had a member of an LLC that was in the UK, and it almost died because the purchase price allocation negotiations weren't up to snuff, in his opinion. So Paul is totally right that this, generally decides what tax rate you're going to get taxed at, and if it's too high, sometimes it just doesn't make sense to sell the business. So heavily negotiated, extremely important, often overlooked.
Yeah, and another anecdotal one. I helped a guy acquire it was a high-tech shop that made machines for pharmaceutical automation. So we're talking about laser, plasma cutters, all this really cool stuff in this shop. About $5 million worth of machines, and that bucket for FF&E had $5 million. Well, guess what? That was in the peninsula. It was on the peninsula. It was like 11% tax that needed to be paid at close, not even at the end of the year, but at close for that piece of it. So very important. If you've got a sizable transaction, once you get there, we highly recommend you talk to an accountant to make sure that you get that right. That is also a piece it's important to understand, that the allocation has to be agreed. It has to be the same for both buyer and seller. The buyer can't have a different allocation than the seller. It has to be negotiated and agreed to. Disclosures. We talked about this earlier, but it is, if there's anything about your business that that could affect future performance, if there's past issues, if there's pending legal action, you need to disclose that and explain it. What you don't want to do is not disclose something and then have somebody find out about it during a diligence period. That'll kill you a deal in a second. And then also there's, if it's not disclosed and then 6 months later something's found out, that's again something as a hard lesson to learn. You don't want to go there. So
one thing I'd add on here is just from personal experience. So disclosures a lot of the time will come up in the purchase agreement. So this is your opportunity within the purchase agreement. And Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but my purchase agreement for business apps, we went through tons of disclosures, everything from, you're really just listing out like things that, you want the buyer to know in advance that may not be good about your business, but they should be aware of. Like an example, have you ever had a lawsuit? Is there, has there ever been like a breach or,
Employee.
stuff like that, where, if they find it after the acquisition and it's damaging to their acquisition and the price they paid for the business, they could come after you legally for not disclosing it. So you have a legal obligation to, and again, I'm not an attorney, so don't take this as legal advice, but just personal advice. So definitely take, I guess my main point is the more upfront you are and the more honest you are with buyers can sense that. Like, you're honest, you have everything put together, you understand, the acquisition process and you understand the importance of these items. So definitely, put a lot of thought into them for sure.
Yeah, I
And-
was just
and-
one more point to add that's actually ironically not necessarily a legal point, but important components in any transaction are rapport and trust. And, those are sort of slowly cultivated and they take a while to, really manifest themselves. And one small little thing, like Paul mentioned, that you didn't mention in a disclosure that comes up in DD can derail an entire acquisition.
Because they think now that you're dishonest, and what else are they not telling me? So it's just, again, don't give them the opportunity. And subsequently, on the flip side of that coin is the buyer disclosure. You want to know, if the buyer has, had to file for bankruptcy, has any liens against them, any pending lawsuits. I mean, that's all important stuff you should know as well. Also, during a transaction, say that you're in a deal, you've disclosed everything that you can to your best knowledge, but then you find out, like one person asked, you find out 3 weeks into it that, you're losing a customer or something. You need to disclose that then as well. It's not stuff you should sweep under the rug. And the mental preparation part is a big deal. It's seriously just, somebody early asked about like the people ghosting them and there's going to be deals that fall out. It's just get yourself prepared mentally that this is going to be a journey. It's exciting. It's stressful. It's fun. It could be very lucrative. But I could tell you without a doubt, in all of the years that I've done transactions, personally over 300 and change, and been involved in, I don't even know, probably over 1,000. I mean, with all of the deals I had to approve and review, I've never seen a deal go from beginning to end without some hurdles and bumps in the road. So just get your head wrapped around it. It's going to happen. There's going to be those hiccups. The importance of that goodwill and the rapport building is pertinent to right here, because when those hiccups happen, if you guys have some goodwill, you just have a conversation and you squash it. It could be not a big deal. If it's an adversarial relationship to that point, that one bump all of a sudden is a mountain. So, but just get yourself prepared for some bumps along the road. Like somebody mentioned earlier, buyers flake. Don't worry about it. Buyers are, sometimes the tire kickers, with the sheer amount of people that we're seeing here, it's just, the realities of people bouncing even after they've maybe even made an offer. An old timer told me when I first started in the business, don't count your commission, don't even add it up until the end of the transaction, because you're getting too, once you start thinking about it, you're doing yourself a disservice. So just don't get overly invested mentally in any particular buyer. It's hard, but just try to remind yourself of that.
Hey, Paul, sorry to interrupt
Go
here.
ahead.
We're at about almost at time here. So just to let everybody know, we have a few more slides. Paul, so if you want to continue, we also have a few more questions, but let me know how you want to proceed.
So let's see. And then, again, guys, you guys will all have this deck afterwards. So I think we're pretty much at the end. During diligence also, be prepared, be flexible. Sometimes something will come up in diligence that will change the transaction, and this could be come up. Maybe it's the bank that is underwriting the deal. If it's financing is a part of this, the bank might want the deal to change. So just, again, go into it open-minded, get educated, understand that it's a process. You're not beholden to accept anything, but just understand during diligence, something can come up and the deal may change. But again, all the more reason for doing diligence in advance. And I think that's the end. So any last questions? We're only a minute over, so I'm happy to stay and do a few more, Roger, if we can.
Yeah, awesome. So we do have another one from David Costello. What exclusivity time period would you suggest negotiating for?
I mean, I think that would be, dependent on your business and the complexity of your business. What I understand is that, from middle market, private equity, investment banks, if they're buying $100 million deal, they're going to send in their whole team. They're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to do diligence and get into that transaction. That's kind of where this grew out of. They want to protect their investment and their time. So they have the exclusivity. That's trickled all the way down to Main Street. And it just doesn't align sometimes. So I would always say, probably 30 days, and then always write in there that they could ask for more time in writing if they need it. So if they're performing and they're getting through it, then there's no reason you shouldn't give them a little bit more time if they ask for it. However, if it's a $50,000 API they're buying and they want to lock you up for 90 days, there's probably a reason behind that. And in a lot of cases, I found that they want to lock you up so they can go shop and try to find money to buy it. All the more important reason to find out how they're going to fund it, who they are, qualify them, and you should be in good shape.
Right. I think we'll leave the rest of the questions. We'll follow up with kind of the email with everything that we have in terms of the deck, as well as everything, the recording, and some of the questions that we have, and we'll answer via email. I see that MicroAcquire site is a little bit is having a bug, so we'll take a look into that for everybody. But yeah, thanks everybody for their time. Paul, anybody else have any last comments, please? But thank you for attending today.
Yeah, so again, thanks everyone for showing up. What we're going to try to do is do this once a month, and just refine this presentation as we go, and just really do our best to educate the community. So any further questions, as has been said, we'll answer here, and you guys know where to find us, and good luck with getting MicroAcquired.
Yeah, and I just want to also echo Paul. Thanks everyone for joining. We're probably going to be doing these a little bit more frequently, and we'll get the recording out to you. And then all the questions that we didn't get to, just due to time constraints, we wanted to keep this to an hour. We'll probably go through those, maybe create a blog post or an FAQ. So thank you for sharing all those questions. And yeah, just understand acquisition's a process. The more that you understand the process and the more you prepare, the higher chances you have of getting MicroAcquired. So thanks for everyone's support. I always like to say we're just getting started, and I appreciate each and every one of you. So thanks for joining.